Good Shabbos. This week is a double parsha of Matas Maseh, and at the end of Parshas Maseh, we have the case of a man or a woman who kills unintentionally, and the halacha is they're supposed to go to an Ir HaMikla, to a city of refuge. If they don't go, the relatives of the victim have either the right or the responsibility to kill that person. And the halacha, the Torah goes on to state that the halacha is that the person who goes to the city of refuge has to stay there at most Kohen Gadol until the high priest dies. And the Mishnah in Masechta Makos, in Tractate Makos, it says, therefore the mother of the Kohen Gadol would bring food to the people in the city of refuge, either that they should pray that her son does not die, or they should not pray that her son does die. And the Gemara asks, and if they don't pray, or if they do pray either way, are you trying to tell me that's the cause of the death of the Kohen Gadol? Does this one person sin and another person get the punishment? Why would the Kohen Gadol die for the sin, it seems seemingly, of the people in the Ir HaMiklat? Or why should he die as a result of the prayers of those people who were murderers? They were unintentional murderers, but they have some responsibility. Those are the people that they should decide the fate of the Kohen Gadol. So the Gemara answers, well, no, the reason is Shelo Bikshu Rachmim. He should have pled with God. He should have prayed that such things should not happen. And simply, when it says he should have prayed, I think that there's something a little bit more there. I think it's not just that he should have sat and prayed, but it's his attitude towards society. He's the leader. He's an authority. He's someone who people look up to. He should be the one who should be emphasizing that people should be careful and that unintentional murders shouldn't happen, because the unintentional murder is when there was some negligence. And negligent murder could happen anytime, but people who worry about human life are going to be less likely to be negligent and cause a murder. And therefore, he's ultimately responsible for that. And what we see here is very simply that a leader, whether it's the Kohen Gadol, whether it's a rabbi, whether it's the Sanhedrin, whether it's the even the secular authorities, they have an influence on people under their authority. Again, the Gemara almost says it as just that he should pray, but I think I understand it that his prayer means that he really cares and he sets a tone, and people know that, people understand it, and they usually somewhat copy the leader. And we have something similar. We're now in the 3 weeks leading up to the destruction of the temples, and the Gemara in Masechta Gittin and Tractate Gittin tells us the famous story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, someone who was invited by mistake to someone who did not like him, and he was kicked out of the feast and publicly humiliated. And he says, since the rabbis were sitting at this feast, and they did not protest, must be that they agree. And he went to the government, the Roman government. He said the Jews have rebelled, and that started the whole process of the destruction of the temple. Again, that's a story which is trying to give an example of sinas chinam, of unnecessary hatred that occurred in the time of the temple. It's really happened even writ large, but be that as it may, it's telling us that not only was the man who kicked this fellow out because he wasn't his friend, and not only was the man who went to the Roman government and caused the destruction of the Jewish people, but it's also suggesting that the rabbis are responsible because they didn't protest. And there also, it's obvious that they're setting a tone. If that's what the rabbis do, then the people are going to act in that way. So there's a simple message, I think, that leaders are responsible. But I think it's important for us to realize the following sort of question, which is, I believe, a debate amongst historians. Are leaders the ones who cause events to happen? Or are leaders, in a sense, just the ones who happen to be there at the right time? History has a way of marching on in certain directions. And the leaders, they might be a trigger, they might make it come quicker or slower, but at the end of the day, they're really only somewhat a pawn of history or a pawn of events or of the times. And this debate goes on in many different instances, but you could talk about World War II. Was it the rise of Hitler? Was Hitler as an individual the one who caused World War II and the Holocaust? Or would it have happened anyway, but maybe in a little different way? Maybe it wouldn't be as bad. But the history was going in that direction. And I think that's something that we always have to ask ourselves. We want our leaders, our authorities, the rabbis, the teachers, parents, to make sure that they're leading, obviously, in the proper way. And as I said before, that they should set the proper tone and have the proper midos, the proper character traits, and act in a kosher way in order to make sure that people follow. But at the end of the day, sometimes the leaders are only following the people. Now, either that's literally true, that they're only doing it in order to make sure that they retain their position of leadership, or they're also a product of society. Society as a whole raises such people, and some of them rise to the top in authority. They're just a product of their times. So therefore, I think that issue still exists today. And on the one hand, we want to hold leaders responsible for what their followers and people under their authority do, and they should make sure that they realize that they have this responsibility that they carry with them. But we also have to realize that as much as we like to blame leaders, we have to understand that they're only a product of the society that they live in. They also have learned from the hamonam, from the masses, from the average people on the street. They also were raised in this culture, in this city, in this country, and they have the same attitudes. And of course, they might rise to the top, and they might be more refined, but it's still a refined form of something which might have some negative aspects to it. And that's something we always have to think about, but we have to realize that leadership is important, but who we choose as leaders, who we create as leaders, is just as important. Good Shabbos.